Hi, this is Cheryl Anderson with the Minnesota Agile Community Meetup Group. And today we have Anne Steiner, who is the CEO of Cprime and actually is my boss. You might know her from the Agile Twin Cities conferences, and that's actually where I met her back in 2015, back before Cprime and the old Dev Jam days. Anne has over 25 years of experience in tech as a developer, product manager, coach, and executive, and is also a frequent speaker at national and regional events. She excels at helping people in product and delivery roles act as a single team, working together for the benefit of the customer. So we'll kick it off to you, Anne.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cheryl. And both Cheryls, thanks for running this group and keeping it going. It's so important to our community, and for inviting me tonight. It's always one of my favorite things to get to come and hang with this group, and hopefully maybe soon we'll be in person back at home. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about kind of project to product, and it's all the buzz in the industry. But one thing, is like, well, if I had the title project manager or program manager or worked in a program management office, this whole project to product thing might make me a little uncomfortable. And what does that really do to planning and what I do? And I want to talk about that tonight. So first of all, I'd like to kind of understand a little bit about y'all. So if you wouldn't mind, bring up the chat and type in the chat, hey, what's your title or what do you do? Are you a project manager? Are you a scrum master? Are you a product owner? Are you a developer? Kind of what do you do? And just punch that into the chat right now, please. All right, we got some business analysts, we got some scrum masters, we got some product managers, we got some agile coaches. Sweet, we got some biz dev people, we got some product owner people. All right, excellent, perfect. Perfect. And no hardcore project managers, so I might not get trolled too much today. It's almost disappointing. Cheryl gave you my intro, so I'm just going to skip over that because she already covered all that. But kind of what I want to share with you tonight is we'll just kind of ground on the basics of project to product. Then I want to talk a little bit about product horizons and how that affects planning horizons. Then I want to talk about starting to think in terms of product roadmaps and outcomes versus thinking about projects and time scope budget. And then lastly, what does this do to planning? Some might think, and gosh, sometimes I dream about, if we did this project to product thing, does that mean we don't need to plan anymore? I mean, whoa, wouldn't that be freaking cool? But some of you are twitching, right? But we're in big girl and big boy business. And in that type of business, we do have to plan. So how can we plan in a manner that fuels agility versus detracting from agility? And that's what we'll talk about. And then in the end, we'll do some questions. The Cheryls have saved plenty of time for questions, so think about them as you go, and there'll be time. All right, so first, let's get a level set on project to product and what we really mean by that. And first of all, this seems trite, but I think it's important. I want to define what I mean by a project and what I mean by a product. So definition of a project, you see here on the left. Project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product or service. I stole this definition from the Project Management Institute's website, and I can't think of a better authority on projects than those good folks. But when I saw this definition, there was a couple things that stood out to me. First, they used the word product or service, and a service is a product, in the definition, which is really freaking cool. And second, they say it's a temporary endeavor, so pretty short life cycle relative to the life cycle of the product, and also to create a unique product or service. Notice it doesn't say maintain, it doesn't say enhance, it doesn't say sustain, it doesn't say scale. It just says create. And projects were very much catering towards just creating some new thing. All right, so what's a product? All right, product, this is a less official definition. The product is the thing that you build that impacts people. Or maybe it's a service that you provide. Like at our company, at Cprime, we don't build and sell software for our clients. We provide services to our clients. So it can be different. And you think of, one of my favorite service companies is Marriott. They provide a service to their clients. So as you think about your product, whatever it is, it's the thing that you build that impacts people. And those people might be external customers. Those people could be internal customers. A lot of clients will ask me, hey, if we're building and working on a product that serves people that have the same employee badge that I do, is it still a product? Well, heck yeah, it is. And in a lot of ways, you're lucky because it's easier to get access to your customers. All right, so let's take this to the next level down as we start to think about planning. In the project world, we've all seen this before. We work with the iron triangle, or I like to call it the triangle of terror. But the whole point of planning in the project world was to accurately predict without changes how long it will take, how much it will cost, and what we will build. And we would try to accurately make this prediction before we even started anything, right? You have to plan before you start, duh, people. And a lot of times you had to do this planning before you could even make an argument to someone in the finance department for funding. And then they would say, well, if I give you this, how much money do you need? How much will it cost? And when will it be done? So in this scenario, we were constantly trying to predict the future, trying to get all three. Now, those of us that have been in the industry for 5 minutes, we know the old joke, and it's no joke. Time, budget, scope, pick two, right? And that's the absolute reality. Always has been, always will be. Agile, none of that crap changes that ever. So I would argue that in the project world, more times than not, especially in the beginning, we would choose to fix scope. I need all of it. And then we would kind of admit, but not really admit, that we were going to overrun cost and schedule. Okay. And I remember working with that product manager, and at times, unfortunately, I'm embarrassed to admit to you all, but we're all friends, that I was that product manager that banged her fist on the desk and said, I need all of this. Well, that was a problem, because when you work off a scope, first of all, we fixed that. Now we can't change. We can't pivot when we learn. We've all worked on projects, I would guess, where we were building something. And at some point in time during this life cycle of the project, we knew without a doubt we were building the wrong thing. But we kept building it because we had committed to it. Whoa, that's crazy. And we've all worked on projects where throughout the cycle, it was revealed to us that something was happening in the market, or something was happening with one of our key customers, or something was happening with a competitor that told us that there was something else we should be building that was more important than what we were building in the project. But we still kept building the less important thing. Why? Because we committed to it. And then we've all worked on projects where we really had this huge scope, and we could have very easily and rationally prioritized it and said, this is more important than this and this and this. But some jerk of a product manager like me wouldn't make that call and said, I want everything. And so we left it to the developers, and the developers in turn picked what was easiest or what was the most fun. And I don't know what it is, call it Murphy's Law, I don't know, but there's some law that governs software that what's easiest and most fun is rarely what's most important. So we weren't building the right thing, we weren't building the most important thing, and we didn't change when we learned. Why? Because we fixed scope. All right, so how do we make that better? I want to flip the triangle upside down, and nothing's going to change. You still get to pick two. Agile does not affect that. Waterfall does not affect that. If I hear one more person say, but when we had waterfall, we had accuracy and predictions, I am going to puke. We never had that. That's a bunch of bogus BS. Maybe we fooled ourselves into thinking we had that, but why do we have so many meetings at the end to discuss whether we were orange or red? Because we were always behind. Maybe it was just me. I don't know. But in this product space, I want to fix cost, and I want to fix schedule, and I want to make scope the variable. Okay? So I'm going to pick cost and I'm going to pick schedule. Now you're going to say, Anne, that's a bold statement, right? Because we're always late and we always go over budget. Here's how I'm going to fix those things. First of all, I'm going to decide up front at the strategic level, how much do we want to invest in an initiative? And we're going to pick a gosh darn number. Okay. Then we'll staff one or more teams to that spend. And you know what's really interesting on the left side, when we were trying to figure out the cost, we were trying to figure out how much will this feature cost to build. And that's kind of a big pain in the butt when you don't really even know what it is, right? But to answer the question, how much will this team cost, is really easy. Take their fully loaded costs or salary and add it up. And you can very easily predict what that's going to be. So I can fix the cost and I can nail that every single time. We'll nail budget. Then fix the schedule. Oof, that one's a little harder. But if we're using our Agile methodologies, if we're building software in a manner where it is always releasable, if we're testing as we go, we're integrating as we go, we have high levels of automation. If we keep an engineering promise that we'll keep our code base always releasable, then I can always release. So that schedule, sure, boss lady, pick a day and I'll be able to release. What I can promise you without a doubt I can release. What I can't promise you is exactly what the scope will be, because that's variable. But it's not completely variable. Here's the commitment we make with respect to scope. We will do the most important things first. So when we get to that release date and the buzzer sounds, the music stops, we will release something. We will release what is done. And what is done will be the most important of the work that was queued up. And I'd argue that all of that is better than what we dealt with in the project world. And we have the ability to work and release on smaller cycles. All right, so that sounded really cute, right? And you probably have a hard time disagreeing, but you're all thinking that will never work at my company. And maybe here's some of the reason why. And I'd say one of the top issues that I've seen for a decade, and I'm afraid I'm going to see for another decade when you look at digital transformation and bringing agility to an organization, is everyone focuses on the team level. And it's not all that hard to get agility at the team level and to get some benefits. But about 10 minutes after you start working that way, you're going to hit some constraints that are above the team level or that are beside the team level that are really inhibiting agility. And I'm going to put some of them on this slide. I call these the big rock constraints, the things that are really holding us back. Funding models. How many of you, have funding models that are forcing you into this predictive project world? I would guess a lot. Separation of business and IT, not working together, maybe a lack of product management, not having dedicated teams because we're aligning people around projects, which, remember, even the PMI said are temporary, and people are ending up on multiple project teams, so they're split and they're inefficient. And then I guess this slide was brought to you all from the Department of Redundancy department, because we have planning and also traditional planning. I used to have on this slide, one of them said the PMO. I might have been changing it because I offended people, but and at the risk of offending more people, this isn't universal, but oftentimes there is no bigger inhibitor to agility than the PMO. But it's not their fault. They're doing their job. They're being forced by the executives to get this illusion of predictability and assurity. And so we have to change that thinking. And that's a lot of what this talk is about. All right, so next up, yeah, we got to have a plan, right? We got to tell the executives something, or they're just going to laugh us out of the boardroom. So let's talk about how that works. So I want to start talking about planning and planning horizons. And here again, I'll show you this picture again in that project world. Again, we were letting scope be variable, but we were trying to create this big scope. And where did that scope come from? And so I would argue in most cases, most of the companies that I go into or have worked for in the last 20 years, they had a pretty clear and meaningful corporate strategy. They knew as an organization where they were trying to go. They knew largely as a product where they were trying to go. But if we're working in the project space, we start with a strategy that makes sense, how we're going to serve the market, how we're going to serve our customers. And then as soon as we start thinking about the project, we shift from thinking about the market and our customers and even our own business and how we'll make money. We immediately shift from that to what is the work that we need to do and how do we break it down? Because a project was a scope of work. Then within that project, we'd have milestones. Maybe they were gates. We passed from requirements to design, or maybe they were actually just larger chunks of work that were done. Then we'd have tasks. Cheryl, you do this, and MC, you do this, and whoever else, you're going to do this. And so then the whole conversation throughout the project is, how are we coming on our work? Well, how much does your customer care about if MC finished her 3 tasks last sprint? And how do you keep your product teams thinking about the customer if all they're thinking about is, oh God, here comes Cheryl, and she's going to ask me if I'm done yet. Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? No, I'm not done yet. No, I haven't updated Jira. Okay. But we're losing that customer centricity. We're losing that focus on the problem. We're losing that focus on that market opportunity that we're going after. And we're being overly, we're indexing on output. We're not indexing on outcome. David Hussman used to use the analogy, and I loved it, that when you think like this, imagine a big pile of gravel had just been dropped on your driveway, and someone said, shovel that and put it over on your neighbor's driveway. And you could do that, and you moving that gravel a shovel at a time, that's output. You're getting work done, you're doing it. But what was the outcome? What value did it have? You were just shoveling gravel. All right, so let's change it. And again, we're going to still start with that strategy, that corporate strategy that makes sense, or that product strategy. But now I want to keep those outcomes that we're trying to get, that value we're trying to give to the customer. I want that thread to go all the way down into everything we do. So instead of going into work, I'm going to start to think about, all right, let's have a roadmap of outcomes that has a bit of a sequence and a timing, but it's like we're trying to drive this outcome. That doesn't mean build this feature. It means help solve a problem for the customer. Okay. Then we'll take those outcomes and we'll break them down into customer journeys or user journeys that are going to help us to understand a flow, a sequence. Some of you, if you've been around as long as me, you remember use cases, and use cases are a great example of this. This is where we literally can say, all right, this is how we're going to help you solve this problem. And then lastly, stories is an independent increment, a step, an action within that customer journey wherein the customer takes a step towards solving that. But all of this becomes about the customer problem, the market opportunity, the outcome we're trying to drive, and solving a problem for them versus us just shoveling gravel. So in short, the left side here is about our work. The right side is about our customer's outcome. Now, I'll ask you to just be reflective for a minute. In your organization, let's talk about roadmaps for a while. And some of you have product roadmaps, some of you maybe more have kind of higher level portfolio project plans, but I'm going to show you 3 roadmaps, and I want you to think, am I like, which one of these are we kind of like? So this first one, and I see this all the time, I'm going to call it a project-based roadmap. But I ask an org, what's your product roadmap? And I get something like this. And it's usually about this descriptive. Here's what we're going to do this year. Big project 1, 2, and 3. And then, you can't start everything at once or you have a work in progress problem. So we're going to start the other 2 in Q2. And now we're working on big project 4 and big project 5. You know what's interesting about this? First of all, I have no idea what any of these projects are going to do in terms of outcome delivery. And usually the names aren't much more descriptive than this, because again, they're describing our work. They're not describing an outcome. Second of all, if you see this, you just know that none of these projects are going to get done, right? And we could get to the end of the year and literally end up with nothing because we're working on these year-long cycles. All right, so this is scenario 1. Project-based roadmaps. This is, and lastly, this is all about planning our work. All right, here's the next one. And oh my gosh, I did this so much as a product manager. It's just embarrassing to me now, but I'm going to call this the feature chase roadmap. We're going to build this, this, and this. And because the competition's building this, this, and this. And when we release in 6 months, we got to have bullet points for the release notes. And this is sales kickoff season. And if you're a product manager during sales kickoff season, you have to stand up in front of the whole sales team at this big party and tell them all the cool stuff they're going to get that they're going to be able to sell so that the head of sales doesn't get lynched in the parking lot because of the quotas. And half the time we're lying. And then, we promise all these features, but then the engineering teams are like, yeah, what about the tech? What about technical debt? And the whole thing's falling apart, and they're probably right. So then we add tech features too, because, that helps. So this features, capabilities, and your product could have way more features than the competition, and you could still get your lunch eaten by the competition, because again, it's about value. It's about solving the right problems. All right, so let's step into modern times and outcome-driven roadmaps. Here we start to say, I want to drive this outcome in the market, and I know that I've been successful because I can observe these results. So as you look at this, for this product in this example, in Q1, they want to drive the outcome of enhancing the resiliency of the purchasing app. And how they're going to observe that is that we have an increase in automated test coverage, we've introduced chaos tests, and we've automated our PR, our pull request process with the CI/CD pipeline. The first thing I'd ask is, as you look at these bullet points, are they measurable? Can we answer these questions with yes, no, true, false, 1 or 0? Yeah, we can. And the other thing is, it isn't build this, build this, build this. It's get to this and measure it this way. And at the end of the quarter, we may not meet these key results or these success criteria, but we can have a conversation of saying, do we want to continue to invest in this outcome and to try to get closer? Or do we want to say we did enough and go on and invest to another outcome? Now, my example is a little simplified because there's only one outcome, and normally there would be multiple, but it kind of gives you an idea. So this is very different than this feature chase roadmap. In this case, it's all about customer and market outcomes. It isn't about a feature. So I'll go back and just bring up the chat again, if you wouldn't mind. Where you work or where you've worked recently, would you say that the roadmaps are more like number 1, about the work, number 2, about the feature chase, or number 3, about the outcomes? All right, we're seeing features, we're seeing 1 and 2, combo 1, 2, 1. Trying to get to outcomes, working on it. Yep, on the way. Very good, Jeff. 2, kind of working towards 3 again with Cheryl N. Got some OKRs. Chris, yeah, we got to be a little careful with OKRs too, because we're getting to the point where we're weaponizing them and we have too many, but that always happens. We're just so bad about that. Team has 3, org has 1 and 2. That's awesome. Good job of driving change. So this group really represents what I kind of see as the normal, where most people are kind of sitting in 2-ish, working towards 3, maybe some 1s. If you're a 1, go ahead and skip 2. Just start working towards 3. You don't have to make all the mistakes that we've been making the last 10 years. All right, so at the end of the day, as we're shifting our planning thinking, we're shifting from planning our work to planning outcomes for the market. This is the first really key thing. All right, next up. Yeah, all right, I guess I gave that away. Do we plan work, features, or outcomes? We plan outcomes. So ask yourself, as you're reflecting on this talk and you go back to work tomorrow, at work, do we plan work, features, or outcomes? All right. And then y'all are talking to the boss or you're talking to the PMO and you're gonna be like, oh, I heard this talk with this crazy woman last night and she said this cool thing, like we should be planning outcomes, not work. And the boss will be like, yeah, that sounds great, but MC, when's that going to be done? Because I got a board meeting next week, and so when's it going to be done, and how much is it going to cost? And you just want to go, ah. And I have made this mistake so many times in my career as a product manager, as an agile coach, as a consultant, where every time somebody says, when will it be done about a product, it just triggers the F out of me, because I want to say it's not going to be done till we sunset it and we unplug it. And that's the absolute truth. But that truth doesn't play well in the boardroom. And as I've become an executive, we have to report to people. We can't be all kind of like froofy and be like, oh, we're agile and it'll just happen when it happens. I mean, that's bogus too, right? We have to give them some sort of answer. And also we have to give them a question to ask that's a better question than this one. So let's talk about how we get there. All right. So we said in planning, we want to shift from planning the work and to planning outcomes and letting that scope be variable. So let's talk about how we can start to communicate this. And remember, I said we're going to make the scope variable, but leadership gives us that give. We have to give them a give, which is two things. We build so that we're always releasable, and we build the most important thing first, and we work in an agreed upon priority order. And you know what? They have the ability to change that priority order at any time. Hopefully not with things we're already working on, but with things lower down. So what's going to happen then is, let's say, maybe not at the roadmap level, kind of at the next level down, think maybe an epic level or more specific outcomes. Okay. We can start to order these things. And do not, please do not do what I'm about to propose at the story level, because it's going to force you to go too deep diving into big discovery. This should be at a higher level than the story level. But what you can start to do, and walking through a product discovery workshop is a really good way to get to this output, is you're going to end up with an ordered list of kind of middle level backlog items. I'm going to call those epics right now, thinking more like a Scrum epic, not a safe epic. If you're in safe, what I really mean is a feature. But start to order those. And this is where product management should be driving this priority with engineering, because there's engineering impacts that go into this order too. And then we have the leaders kind of look at that, but we order them. Here, I've got more than 11, and we've ordered them 1 through 11. And now we've given them a rough size, small, medium, large, like that. Okay. No deep dive, no writing the stories, and estimating them and adding it up. No, don't do that. Now, when we start to lay that out, we're going to know, we've all been around the industry more than 5 minutes. We're going to know that there's certain things that are going to get done in the time. We're pretty sure of it, right? And we're going to know, because this always happens, that there's certain things that there's no way they're going to get done. Like, in honor of Martin Luther King, we just had his holiday this week. I have a dream. Yeah, great. And then there's some space in between. And there we just flat out don't know. So, I love to draw a picture like this for leaders of, yeah, these are the things we know we're going to get. These are the things we're pretty sure we're not going to get. This is the gray area. So when will it be done, or will it be done by this release date? Because remember, we can potentially fix that. What I'm going to say is it's going to land somewhere in between here. And I absolutely love, if I'm forced to commit to something, to commit in a range. Okay, commit in a range. If the more specific you are, the more certain someone thinks you are, and the more they're going to hold you to that certainty. But we're not certain. So illustrate that by committing in a range. Now here, this range is pretty big. So here's what your execs are going to say when you try to do this. First of all, they're going to say, that's unacceptable. I need all of it. Okay, that's the first thing they're going to say. And here's how you respond to that. Here's the first thing you say. I understand. We would like to be able to do more too. Before we go there, can you do this for me? Would you say that this is the right order or no? If they say no, adjust the order. If they say yes, cool. You just got the first win. Okay. Now, get them to agree to the order. Once they've agreed to the order, you can say, here's what I can do. I'm making a commitment to you. I'm going to work this in order, which means you're going to get the most important things. Now, given the time and capacity that we have, we're not going to get all the way down. You may not believe me right now, and I might be wrong, who knows? But we're going to work this in order and we can see. Or now would be a great time to invest more in this initiative, especially while we're early and can still add people. We could maybe steal Cheryl's team and she could work on this initiative. And that would help us to go further down the list. They're going to say, no, we can't do that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Then they're going to say, hey, there's 4 things in there. What the heck? When am I going to know? When will it be done? And this is where employee tools, the best darn thing I ever learned from a project manager. Is one of the best project managers I ever worked with. His name's Kevin Mackin. Some of you might know him. He's local to Minneapolis. And Kevin said, Anne, when you get in that situation, you got to play the date for a date game. And he was so right. So instead of saying, when will you know or whatever, promise a date of when we will give an update and we will narrow the range further. Maybe it's a sprint, maybe it's a PI, maybe it's a month. But I promise you, I will tighten my range in this X period of time. And by then you're going to know more, you're going to have progressed. We're starting to get some things done. So now at this point in time, I know that 5's looking good. We're going to nail 5. But it's also not looking good for 8, right? And we're staying focused and we're working top down. But I've narrowed that range. And as we get closer and closer, we'll narrow more and more and more. And we will get to that certainty and that predictability. And in time, they'll come to trust this. And the other cool thing about working this way is they can say, all right, maybe I want to just release after 1 or 2 or 3. Or if we miss 6 and 7, no problem, boss man. We can just release that after the next sprint. We're always releasable, and soon they start to get comfortable with having more flow because they know the next thing is coming next. But this type of dialogue is very, very effective. And again, get them to commit to the order. The other thing they get is they might change the order later. And here we might say, you know what, 5's a large, but 6 is a small, and I really want 6. I might switch them. That's okay. That's cool, you know? All right. So executives have always asked, when will it be done? When will it be done? When will it be done? And part of this is our fault. We haven't given them a different question to ask. I would challenge them to start asking the question. I coach them to start asking the question, what should we build next? What are we building next? And when you're giving status, you can start to change their mindset by giving status in a manner of not, we're this complete done, or we did this, this, and this tasks. They don't care. They don't read that. You know, when they get your email on Friday, all they do is they look at the green square. And if it's green, they really don't read it. If it's red, they kind of skim it and then go, oh God, what's really going on? So start to give status like, this is what we've done. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing next. And then focus them to critique this is what we're doing next. Because if we're always working on the most important thing, we're always providing the highest value. And they can help to steer us and actually have way more control over the outcomes than they ever had before by being a part of that iterative, what should we do next? What should we do next? What should we do next? All right, here's another way to think about this. We need to plan at different levels of the backlog. And again, we've talked about strategic planning, and I think most of corporate America is pretty good about it. And we talk about sprint level backlog planning. I want to call this story planning. And I think most companies are good at this too. But what happens in between is a bit of a mess. How do we get from the strategy to the outcome-driven roadmap? And how do we get from that roadmap to really well-formed independent epics that aren't just file folders of crap? Because we're basically in extreme situations jumping from strategy to stories. And it's like if I bought a box of Legos and it was going to build the Starship Enterprise, but there's 350 Legos, that picture on the box is the strategy. When I come home and I dump it out on the table and I got the 350 Legos sitting here on my desk, that's the work items. And if I can't look at the picture in the box and kind of break it down and have a little help, I'm going to build something with my 350 Legos, but it ain't going to look like the Starship Enterprise. And a lot of times we ask our developers to build the Starship Enterprise, and we never even show them the picture on the box. All right, so kind of landing the plane here. As you're thinking about planning and approaching it from a product-centric manner, think in product all the way from strategy to delivery. That means think in customer and market problems and outcomes and value you want to deliver to them. Let's worry about their outcomes, not our work. Subsequently, let's plan and sequence their outcomes, not our work. What this will allow you to do is to adjust till you get the desired outcomes. We may not hit all the KRs every quarter, and that's okay. If you are hitting all your KRs every quarter, you're gaming the system, because in the real world, that doesn't happen. But when we miss a KR, what we should be asking is not, why did we miss? What we should be asking is, do we want to invest more to hit this KR, or is there something better to be investing in? transition the conversation and help leaders to transition the conversation from when will it be done to what outcome should we drive next? What should we do next? The first thing you can do right away is start changing your status reports to report status and what have we done? What are we doing? What are we doing next? And ask for their input on the next. Always work on the most important thing first. Deliver in order. That's one of our 2 promises. The other promise is that we'll always be releasable, so we can release whenever somebody deems that we have enough value to release. This one's a big one I haven't really talked about, but planning, like everything else, should be iterative. One of the things that I struggle with the Agile movement, especially in the early days, was we made it really clear that dev and test should be iterative. And we forgot to send the memo out that design should be iterative, that requirements should be iterative, that planning should be iterative, that documentation should be iterative, that compliance should be iterative. Planning should be iterative too, just enough, just in time. If you have an upfront planning process, that's a red flag. All right. And then last but not least, estimate in ranges. And then narrow the range throughout the cycle. And the more time that goes in the cycle, the more certain you'll be, the more you can narrow the range. So this, friends, is product-based approach to planning. And you know, I poke fun at project managers and PMOs sometimes, but planning is important. But the key thing is we switch from project to product planning is in the project world, change was bad. And we were operating under the illusion that if we planned adequately, we could manage change. I can't think of a bigger oxymoron in this world than the expression manage change. But in the product world, we're planning to change. We're planning to be able to change, because being able to change and to adjust and to respond to our customer and market needs, that's the differentiator right now. That's what's separating good companies from bad companies and good products from bad products. All right. If you're stoked about this project to product stuff, we have lots of other stuff around it on cprime.com. I've got a webinar where I deep dive on product management. I've got a webinar where I deep dive on funding, which is a big one. And we've got this white paper here too that kind of talks about the whole gamut. So check that out, cprime.com under insights. And then last but not least, here's my contact info. If we're not already connected, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, or if you'd like to continue the conversation beyond the Q&A, please feel free to shoot me an email, and at steiner@cprime.com. So Cheryl, back to you if we want to do some questions.
Yep, great. Anybody can feel free to come off of mute and ask your question. I had muted everybody just to make sure we didn't end up with background noise.
I have a question. Hey, Annie, this is Piyush. Really enjoyed your presentation, so thank you. You know, when this question is asked, when this will be done, and this question often comes from really senior executives, and it's not easy to ask them to ask a different question, because these folks are very used to asking this question almost all the time. So how do we make that transition?
Yeah, if I was working with really senior executives, I'd start with the roadmap. And I'd talk them through the roadmap, and I'd say, you know, this in roadmaps, a general span is 12 to 18 months, I think, is kind of comfortable. And obviously things on the left we're more certain of than things on the right. So I'd start sharing the roadmap. And my roadmap here is starting with Q1 because it's Q1, but imagine we're in like Q3 or something. And what I would typically do throughout the cycles, I'd update my roadmaps and I'd put green check marks by things we got, but things will move, right? So I might add rare arrows because something moved out, or I might add something in green because it moved in because we adjusted to the market. So I'd talk through all that, and I'd say, hey, these are the outcomes we're driving after in this period of time. And they'll say, when will you be done? When will you be done? And then I'll keep bringing them back to, this is the order we're working in. This is what we're focusing on now. This is what we're focusing on then. And then I'd keep asking, are we working in the right order? Are we doing the right things? If they have the knowledge to answer that question. If they don't, I would tell them why I believe we're working in the right order and we're doing the right things. Get them focused on What are we building next? What are we building next? What's going to provide the right value? But show them what we've done and what we've accomplished too, in the same way you want them thinking about it. So don't give a feature by feature demo. Say, we accomplished this outcome, this is how we measured it. Then you might show them what that looks like. That's cool. But just start to change your language and keep bringing them back to, are we building the right thing? And at first it'll be uncomfortable, I'll tell you, but they'll come around in time, and they'll actually, especially if they're kind of like product people, they'll start to geek out on you asking them something else. I worked with a team at Ameriprise a while back, and we were going through this same transition, and it was interesting. We had this big story map on the wall, and they kept asking, when will we be done? When will we be done? And I was getting so frustrated with this because we had a fixed date. We were going to be done on the date. It was just how much will it be? And the story map was kind of mid-level. And what I started doing, and I never said anything about it, but the story map was on the wall, and we always met in the same conference room. And all the leaders always sat on one side of the table, and all of the rest of us sat on the other side. And conveniently, they were looking at the story map. And so as the team started finishing stories, I started coloring them with green, and always use green. Markers, green, check marks, green, fonts, green, everything. I don't know what it is. It's like Pavlovian, green, never use red. So a story that was completely done, or an epic that was completely done in the story map, I colored in all green. And an epic that we were working on, I colored in half green. And then I kept doing this, and I never said anything about it, but I had coached the team. You're going to demo this way. You're going to start by pointing to the story map, saying this is the journey that we did, showing it. Then you're going to demo. Then you're going to come back and say this is the next journey we're doing, and this is how it fits in the big picture. And it was interesting. We're maybe about 2/3 through this release. We're coming up on the date, and someone asked on this leadership team, when will it be done? And one of the other leaders, and again, I'm ready to puke, like, it's like, come on, people. One of the other leaders busted in and goes, well, look at the story map. They're like 3/4 done, and we're like 3/4 of the way. It's actually looking pretty good. And he was just eyeballing it, based on the green, but it was exactly right. And so be a little patient with them, but give them information in the way we want them to start thinking about the information. Even if you have to give both, like one of my coaching mistakes I made was, I always thought, and this comes from my developer roots, that this whole stoplight status thing is stupid AF. And I coached the team, take away the stoplight status, it's stupid AF. And that was a huge mistake. And the execs revolted, and we had to bring it back, and I had to own it so that people didn't get fired in the PMO. And I never got it until I became an executive. And after I became an executive, I started to understand that there's more problems than time. And so the stoplight status, all it's really should be saying, we shouldn't be talking about it for hours and hours in the boardroom of like, is it amber? Is it yellow? Is it orange? We should just put one on there. And really what we're trying to say is, look at me or don't look at me. Worry about me or don't worry about me. And now that I get what it's like being an executive, the green to me is just saying, all right, I can skip this. I can hit delete on this email. And now I'm a big proponent of stoplight status. But so give them their stoplight status, but think of it as you're sending the signal, look at me or don't look at me. How many times have we lied about our status because we didn't want them to look at us? But we couldn't get help then. We couldn't be real. We couldn't have prioritization conversations because we lied. And is that their fault? Well, maybe they suck at psychological safety or whatever, but I think that's kind of on us for not having the guts to ask for help. So anyway, long rant, but if you have to keep the traditional metrics, put them side by side with this is what we've done, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing next, and keep asking the question, are we working on the right thing? Are we working in the right order? What do you think we should do next? Is this journey more important than that journey? Is this outcome more important than that outcome? If they always say, as long as we agree on the order, then you can end with, I promise you we'll do what you've dictated is most important first. I promise you the team's working as fast as they can with the investment that we have. If you want us to go further down the list, we will need increased investment.
Love your stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, this is Amy. I have a question. First of all, it's a pleasure to meet you. And this was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. So my question is, given the scale of some of the organizations that we work in these days, really large, most of them, they are undergoing some kind of scaled agile transformation. And there are so many expectations, right? Is there, I mean, I know this is a loaded question, but is there an easy way to perhaps, accommodate unplanned work? Because no matter what you do, no matter how much you plan, there will be issues that come in out of the blue, right? That the end customer is really upset about. So when that happens, what do we do? Is it just a question of reprioritizing, or do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. And the expression you're using, unplanned work, is really interesting, right? Because this is where we need to come after the mindset. And I totally understand where you're coming from. And I've asked the same question of like, all of our work is really unplanned at some point in time, right? But
Right.
at a high level, and it kind of depends on what the unplanned work is, right? If it's a bug or something, let's take the easiest example. Let's say it's a bug, right?
Right.
We can kind of normalize over a period of time that we're going to get X amount of bugs, and we can just bucket that. Like if I'm working in sprints or gosh darn for sure PIs, I wouldn't try to say we're going to do these 10 bugs. I would say I'm going to allocate 5 days for bugs, and normally we get about 10 done. So that can always flow, right? But
Right.
that's the easy part, and I'm sure you're doing that already and can manage that, because no executive's going to ask you about a bug unless we're down or something like that. But
Right.
let's take it to a higher level. And if you're working in a safe environment, one of the things I really like about safe is it puts a lot of focus on the middle level backlog. So Scrum talks about epics and stories, but safe has 3 general levels.
Right.
Epics. And epics are kind of like projects, unfortunately, in safe. I would argue they're too big, but think of an epic as a project. And then
Right.
features tend to be those
Yes.
customer journeys that I was talking about.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's say something's changing at the feature level. And
Yeah.
and one thing to check in your org, and I
Right.
run this by like Ken France, who's our safe guru, safe fellow, is
Okay.
PI planning. There is a myth that people say
Yes.
that safe says this, but it doesn't. People will
Right.
argue that safe says to plan all the stories for the PI. That is false. You
Right.
should be planning the features for the PI, and
Exactly.
you have enough stories to get through the first sprint. But that's really the sprint plan. It's not the PI plan. So
Right.
let's assume we're doing that right. We're planning features for the PI. Well,
Right.
then it becomes this picture.
Yes.
Exactly right here. So if
Right.
you're in sprint 2 of the PI
Yeah.
and you're working on 3, one of the rules I always try to enforce is if I'm working on it, you have 2 choices. Either let us finish or stop it and we're throwing away the code. If you stop it, there's no pausing. If you stop something and you try to come back to it later, you end up throwing away the code anyway.
Mhm.
But if we know it's the wrong thing, we should stop it, but there's no pausing. But then if we decide that 5's more important than 4, we should
Right.
shift, or maybe something totally new, X. Well, if X is more important than 4, then it should come in. And at the end of the sprint or the PI,
Right.
do we
Yes.
thump the team for not doing 4? Well, heck no. We applaud the team and the release train for responding to change and
Yeah.
adjusting priorities as things changed.
Right. Right. Just like you had mentioned earlier, it's also to do with the mindset, right? Change is a good thing. And
Yes, ma'am.
especially if whatever bug or whatever comes in is a deal breaker, I mean, we have to get to that first. So thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank
Yeah,
you.
great question. Thank you. And to go with your safe riff, if you go to the next level, on the epic level, and we start to
Right.
look at lean portfolio management,
Yes.
really at the core of lean portfolio management and all those buzzwords is exactly the picture I have on this
Exactly.
slide.
Right, absolutely. And that's why as SPCs, that's the first thing we do when we go somewhere, we train that layer. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work.
Mhm.
But thank you
That's
so much.
right.
Much appreciated.
Yes.
Great. What other questions do we have?
You guys want to hear a Vikings joke?
Yes.
Sure.
No, I have a
Yes.
question because I know this meeting's going to end. So Anne, this is Anne Marie Tro speaking. I'm 4 months into a new environment and they're very waterfall,
Okay.
but they want to be hybrid agile, or we're trying to be somewhat of a hybrid agile. And we don't have any tools. They basically use PowerPoint.
Oh, goodness gracious. Okay.
But I'm on the business side, so I need to preface that, but I've kind of set it up for my program that we will be using AHA as a roadmap tool because I'm responsible for the roadmap. And so what I'm concerned about is it's how can I get them to use the right tool unless right now only I will have access to the AHA roadmap. And then we will eventually have other teams on Azure DevOps for the actual backlog work and actual development work. So am I setting myself up for a failure with the fact that I'm somewhat happy that I'm getting off of PowerPoint, but that's only for me. My stakeholder readouts, a lot of the actual work is being done in Excel and PowerPoint.
Yeah, you are. I'd say don't fight quite as hard as you are. As we look at these levels, strategy is almost always in PowerPoint. Coolio.
Yep.
Roadmap, we might use a tool like AHA, but I'll tell you, I worked over a decade in product management, and I've worked another decade as an executive, and I've never seen a roadmap actually used out of AHA. It's always converted to PowerPoint. We're not going to show AHA to sales. We're not going to show AHA to the board. We're not going to show AHA even to the CEO. And heck, most of the time we won't even show AHA to the developers because there's a bunch of stuff in there we don't want them to see. So AHA is for product management to manage its work. And you can use it to manage your work, but think just for a second. I'm using AHA because it's a collaboration tool and I'm the only one in it. So
I know.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So let them keep their roadmap, and you can still manage with AHA and you can show them and trash like that, but let them keep their roadmap in a slide. That's fine. Now, as we go to the rest, the backlog, the work items, yeah, those need to be in ADO. And that's fine. They're going to be in ADO. There tends to be a little separation. So having a PowerPoint to ADO separation here, that kind of works for me, as long as make sure everyone who's involved understands the roadmap, has seen the roadmap, knows where to find the roadmap. And every quarter, mark up that slide with, this is what we accomplished. I always use green and red, like red if something pushed, and arrows, and you can kind of see what happened throughout the year and the changes. So as long as they know how to map what I'm doing back to the roadmap, back to the strategy, doesn't matter what tool it's in.
Okay. No, that's fair. Keep in touch. Thank you. I'll be back next month.
Sweet. Craig, I like that hat. That's sexy, man.
Oh, there we go. I had to unmute myself. I have 2 mutes, just in case the dog starts to do things. Lex.
Yeah, I do. I was going to make a comment about you being muted and that maybe being the leader of the world, but I'll hold that.
Yes. Well, I do have a little top hat for Lex, so
Of course you do.
He's not napping.
That's great.
All right, I'll tell you all the Vikings joke. Do you guys know why Vikings eat Cheerios off of a plate? And of course they eat Cheerios because it's General Mills product, go Minnesota. But do you know why they eat their Cheerios off a plate?
No.
Because anytime they get near a bowl, they just choke.
That's good.
Is it too soon?
That's awesome. I'm writing that one down because I'm gonna use it.
And Anne, are you actually a Vikings fan or are you a Packers fan?
I'm a Packers fan. Yeah.
For some reason, that stuck in my head that you were probably a Packers fan.
Yep. I bleed cheese. Born and raised in God's country.
Well, we went one game for closer than you did this time.
That's true. Yep. Yeah, this was not our year. And the Vikings made a great step. They won close games instead of losing them this year. So that's a huge step. And your coach is very good looking.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
true.
So, Anne, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm dealing with an issue in regards that we can't get the stakeholders management to commit. If something starts going wrong, they want to start doing dual paths. How can we get them to commit to say, yes, we will finish this in order to get where we need to be, instead of every time we run into the issue that we need to research, they want to do a plan B at the same time?
So what won't they commit to? Strategy, roadmap, high-level backlog items, or stories?
Work in progress. So it would be the stories.
Okay.
So we're working on the
Management's
story.
involved in choosing stories?
Well, I choose the stories, but if we run into any type of roadblock, because, they participate in the various ceremonies, but if we run into a roadblock, let's say, the software we're using, it has a vulnerability and the vendor says we can't get fixed until end of 2023. Well, that's a red flag for them. So they want to find a different product. So we're sitting there working on the one product, trying to get work done, but then they want us also looking at another product to replace that one because they're unhappy because they are not meeting that vulnerability.
And is this an engineering manager or a product manager that's thrashing you?
I am the product manager, so it would be security and architecture.
Security and architecture. Interesting. All right. So I'm not usually one to tout the Scrum Bible, but this is a lot of what Scrum really helped us with, is within the boundaries of the sprint, we don't change the plan. What's your sprint length?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. All right. So it should be fair enough to say that every 2 weeks, we're not going to change the plan. And there is a provision where you can abort a sprint, but it's very rare. I've actually only participated in that once, and it was basically because our product was EOL'd.
Yeah,
so
I've had it happen before
and we
too.
all got fired. But I would argue you need to lock down the sprint. Now, if there's a scenario like, okay, let's imagine, we're working in a sprint and the product we were researching, we just found out got EOL'd. Okay, that's a problem. But then maybe we should stop researching it. Or if it's really a spike, okay, finish the spike and then we can react at the end of the week. And if your organization really can't help itself from changing every 2 weeks, you could potentially propose a 1 week sprint, but we have to protect the sprint. We have to protect the stories, because trying to do dual path, one, it's going to create a work in progress problem. You're going to end up getting less done. Two, they're basically doubling the scope of every sprint. And I would show them the thrashing. I tell a story all the time, and a lot of you have probably heard it, where when I was a young product owner, I was trying to push a team to go a little harder. They had a lot of predictability, and I thought they were kind of resting on their laurels, and they were always doing 12 stories every sprint. So I bullied them into taking 15. And I really believed in my heart of hearts that worst case scenario, I would get the 12. And then that would prove they weren't screwing with me and I had nothing to lose. I believe that in my heart of hearts. But at the end of the sprint, we got 10. Why did we get 10?
Too much
Spread
work
the
in
people too
progress.
thin.
I had created a work in progress problem. They started all 15. So we started more, but we got less done. And that's what your stakeholders are doing. And start to show them that sprint by sprint, you're causing this disruption. You're slowing this down. Protect the sovereignty of the sprint. If you must reduce the sprint cycle, reduce the sprint cycle. But this is a place to stand firm. They can't introduce new scope into the sprint. If they know something is wrong, they can stop it, but they can't introduce new scope into the sprint.
Okay.
I was going to say that's one thing in the world of security, just because that's part of my background is, I've lived through a ransomware attack and, you don't ever want to deal with that. So if security has a hard enough reason why that product shouldn't go into production, it probably shouldn't go into production.
But bring them in sooner, because that reason shouldn't be surfacing halfway through a sprint after we've already authored the epics and the stories. So security and architecture need to be a part of discovery, likely in this scenario too, and maybe they are, and they're just not
They are.
taking a call. And that's problematic.
Right, but this was found within a penetration test. So it wasn't
Mhm.
something that was known beforehand. They ran into it. And then, like I said, the vendor says we can't resolve this until end of 2023. And now they're raising their hands up saying, no, we can't allow that.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think that's valid. I mean, a pen test is a test, right? So you ran the pen test, you found a vulnerability, that's equivalent to a bug. If you had a story that had an open bug on it, would you release that? No. So that's different than saying, we want to take a whole different design direction because I don't feel good about this anymore. You know, that to me is okay. Again, if it's happening every single sprint, maybe we need to run the pen testing more on shorter cycles. But yeah.
Right. Because the software isn't our software, we just use the software. So it is a vendor software. And that's where we're running into the issue is, okay, we're going forward with all the plans that we have for this product. But when this came through and then they said, oh, we can't get it done, that's when everybody's raising a flag saying, hey, we should be looking at different products.
Yeah,
So
and they're
that's
probably
through everything.
right. One thing you might want to think about is slice off a team or even, you know, a tiger team within that team, have them look forward to alternate products focused on that, keep the other folks going on the path so that you don't have people trying to run two paths.
And that's also an issue because I have 2 people for 2 products.
Well, I don't know if we have enough time tonight to delve into that.
Yeah, we're looking to hire, but right now I'm with 2 people. So this is where it's really getting to be a struggle.
If you're short of developers, I know a company that's good at helping people find them.
And ask the security team if there's anything that they can do to remediate that problem from entering that into that software. You know, if there's something that they can do on their side.
And I assume you're leaning on the vendor, right?
Yes, the vendor has to resolve the vulnerability. So it's nothing the team can do. We
Right.
have to wait for the vendor to come in and resolve or give us the software update to resolve the issue.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's impacting what we're trying to do on the software because now they're saying, okay, maybe we should be looking at other options.
Yeah, so maybe, you know, one thing I might propose is, hey, let's call timeout. Next sprint, we'll just look at other options. Let's pause what we're doing. Let's explore other options and let's give the vendor 2 weeks to respond. But that's focused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
More questions.
Anne, when are you going to come back and talk with us more?
When there's leaves on the trees.
Okay. All right.
I've turned into a total wuss. I'm gonna have to hand in my Minnesota driver's license because I've been wintering in Arizona and I'm falling into it like with all these old people like, oh my God, it's 50 degrees. It's so cold.
Yeah. It's great. No, we'll have something in person come spring. I'm like not doing this winter thing. So
yeah, that's smart. Oh, I can't wait till we're back. I'd love to hang with you guys in any capacity.
And I have one last question before this ends. I've been asked by my director to do a mini Agile session. I mean, not like what you would do, but just like a 90 minutes quick session just to pivot to more of understanding MVPs. Am I setting I'm just a little bit worried because again, it's just to show them how to do requirements in slices. Any advice on that? So again, I'm not getting them certified. I put lots of caveats out there to protect myself. But any advice for me as I just show them what base, because all of these people, I think they know a little bit, but they never really pursued learning it. And it's a team of 6 people, team of 6.
Okay. Are they
Really
engineering side directors or product side or both?
I have a hybrid, but the engineering side, they're further ahead. But we have the actual builds are done by a vendor. So even the engineering side is quasi business. Does that
Okay.
make sense? So
Yeah,
they're
it does.
engineers, but they're not doing any builds. They're guiding. They own a roadmap too. A different team runs their roadmap. I own mine, and then now I kind of semi-volunteered to do this mini session. And now I'm concerned that I'm only giving them a snapshot just to be practical.
Yeah. Some of the advice I give in a scenario where product management is kind of the least mature and in a lot of cases the least interested, or the business or whoever it is. One, don't talk about Agile for Agile's sake, and don't talk about how Agile helps engineering. They don't care. They really, really, really don't care. Don't ever say the word process. That makes them go la 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 la. So talk about try to turn the desk around and approach it from their side. Here's what product managers are afraid of. They're afraid of customers yelling. They're afraid of not getting enough value into the market fast enough. And they're afraid that if they don't think about something or tell IT something soon enough, they won't get it. And IT will be like, well, you didn't put that in requirements. And they can't adjust and pivot. So when I start to have these conversations with product managers, I say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could change? Wouldn't it be cool if we were more responsive? Wouldn't it be cool if you could actually see this coming together and then adjust things? Wouldn't it be cool if you were able to change later and no one said, oh, that's not in the scope? Yeah, that'd be freaking cool, right? Wouldn't it be cool if we could incorporate user feedback faster? And then you start to get them saying, yes, it's just like a sell. And the next thing, be careful with the term MVP. It universally triggers people. If you're a product manager, it triggers us because when we hear that, here's what we think. And it's not fair, but this is what we think. Development's going to build some piece of shit. They're going to release it. They're going to say, oh, it's okay that's a piece of shit because it's just the MVP. But then we're never going to come back to it. And I'm going to be stuck listening to customers complain about that POS for the next 10 years. Here's what engineering thinks when you say MVP. Well, the stupid product manager is going to call it an MVP, but they're really going to think of all the same crap that they would have thought of anyway. And then once we release it, we're not going to be able to change it and make it better. We all need to get past that. So I've never been a fan of that term, but let's think about working in roadmaps. Let's think about iteratively delivering value. And Mr. and Ms. Product Manager, what that means is you can change as we learn. And no one from IT is going to say to you, no, we don't have time for that, or we don't have the scope. We're going to say, what order do you want us to work in? And you can drive the bus. You can see this coming together. We can change, we can maneuver. Also, if we work in these smaller chunks, if we deliver value in smaller pieces, we can deliver value more frequently. And I always use the bus analogy. Think about Minneapolis buses before COVID when people actually went downtown. Our bus system is a commuter bus system. So buses aren't leaving every 5 minutes. But if you're on the bus to like Eden Prairie, there's only 1 or 2 of them after work. And if you miss the Eden Prairie bus, I don't know what you're doing, right? You're taking an Uber or something. But I live in the city and I rose the 825. In the 825 after work, there were like 1 every 5 minutes. Okay. And a lot of my time downtown, I worked at Ameriprise, and my bus stop was just across 7th Street from Ameriprise. And my bus, if I saw it pulling away, I was like, man, no big deal. I'll duck into the Grand Hotel, have a drink. I'll come out in 10 minutes and everyone's happy. And so I wasn't going to like bust ass across 3 lanes of traffic and play Frogger and almost get hit and run. And I'm kind of a big girl, so running's no good. But that Eden Prairie person, if they saw their bus leaving, they were going to tear across that street, almost get killed, running like, Carl Lewis towards that bus. And you know why? Because there wasn't going to be another bus for a long time. Well, releases are like that. If the business has bad behavior, it's because when we release annually or even quarterly in some scenarios, that bus isn't coming for a really long time. So they're trying to get on the bus with their thing. But if the bus comes every 5 minutes, they'll start to relax and they'll know it's okay. I'll get the next bus. So
Yep.
start talking about those cycles, learning, flexibility, being able to adjust, always working on the most important thing first, and having more control and input throughout the cycle.
Yep, no, that's good reminder. I'm just worried long-term that we really do have to get onto the right tool. We really do, as a team, have to understand PI planning, because I can't be talking this forever, right? So, but no, thank you. I'll remember that.
Yeah, and let me know if you need some help. You know, we love to come in and talk to leaders. So sometimes it's not right, but sometimes if a doofy consultant comes in and says the same thing that the employees said, they actually listen.
Yep, no, I believe you. Thank you.
Mhm. All right, Cheryl, if you don't mind, let's wrap. This has been a blast and I really appreciate everyone, but I got to get to dinner, friends.
Yep, it's been great. Thanks so much, Anne.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you all.
presentation.
Really appreciate the
Fabulous.
questions.
Really loved it, Anne. That was great.